Welcome back to our channel. Today's story about a quiet girl on a routine flight noticed something no one else could, and her courage would soon save hundreds of lives. Flight 907 had taken off into a quiet afternoon sky, the kind of sky pilots always loved. Steady winds, soft clouds, nothing unpredictable. Passengers settled into their seats. The crew moved calmly through the aisles, and the plane climbed smoothly toward cruising altitude. Everything looked perfect. Everyone felt safe, but sometimes danger enters quietly, so quietly that only one person can sense it. Among the 270 passengers sat a 15-year-old girl named Arya Malik. She wasn't extraordinary. On the outside, a quiet, observant teenager who usually kept her headphones on and her thoughts to herself. But inside her mind lived an unusual ability. She had an extremely sensitive sense of hearing. Tiny sounds that others ignored always stood out to her. Patterns, rhythms, vibrations. She noticed everything. As the engines hummed their steady tune, Arya closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the calm cabin air. She felt the faint vibration through the armrest, the gentle pulse of the engines pushing the aircraft higher. Everything sounded normal, until something shifted. A subtle tremor kissed the metal beneath her seat. Soft, almost like a heartbeat skipping once. Arya's eyes opened. She leaned slightly forward, one hand pressed lightly on the sidewall next to her. There it was again, a tiny sharp tick buried beneath the engine's steady roar. Like a warning whisper hidden inside a symphony. Nobody else reacted. Passengers continued talking, scrolling, sleeping. But Arya felt a quiet unease spread through her chest. The plane leveled off at 36,000 feet. Flight attendants prepared for meal service. The pilots up front relaxed into cruise mode, and the aircraft sliced through the sky as if nothing were wrong. But Arya's hearing painted a different truth. That tick, it was repeating, slow but rising, like a clock counting toward something. She pressed her ear slightly closer to the wall. This time, she heard a faint trembling hum that didn't belong to a healthy engine. Instead of the smooth, even rhythm she always heard during flights, this one sputtered with a strange, uneven pulse. A cracked, metallic groan lingered at the end of the cycle, soft but present. Almost painful to her heightened senses, a pattern formed instantly in her mind. 3 long vibrations, a pause, 1 sharp metallic click, then silence, then repeat. 3, pause, 1, repeat. Her heartbeat quickened. To most people it would sound like nothing, but to her the repetition meant stress, mechanical stress. Something that wasn't supposed to be happening at this altitude. Arya gripped the armrest. She didn't panic, but her instincts sharpened. She looked around the cabin. Still calm, still ordinary, still safe. But the sound was growing. A vibration, deeper this time, rippled through the side of the aircraft. The plastic panel beneath her fingertips felt warmer than before, and the metallic click at the end of the cycle turned into a short, rattling crack. She inhaled sharply. This wasn't random. The engine, one of them, was in distress. Her eyes drifted toward the wing. Everything looked visually normal, steady, bright sunlight reflecting off the metal surface. But her ears betrayed the illusion. She knew that engines often gave signs long before anything became visible. The smallest change in turbine balance, the slightest shift in airflow, the tiniest crack in a pressurized line, all could create microscopic sounds. Arya sat back but couldn't relax. She closed her eyes again, trying to isolate the noise the way she always did with everyday sounds. She imagined the engine's internal components, the compressor blades spinning, fuel lines pressurized, bearings rotating. She had watched dozens of plane engine documentaries, fascinated by the power of flight. But now, something inside that engine wasn't spinning the way it should. The cabin lights dimmed for the entertainment screens. The soft rumble of the aircraft surrounded everyone like a comfortable blanket. But to Arya, it felt like a warning pulse. She heard the rhythm deepen again, a harsh drag on the spinning cycle. Like metal brushing metal, her breathing grew faster. Was it dangerous? Was it just turbulence starting? Was she imagining it? No, her senses were never wrong. Arya leaned forward again, this time pressing her fingertips gently on the tray table. Vibrations traveled differently through different surfaces. The tray table, the seat frame, the wall, each revealed a different layer of the plane's heartbeat. And this heartbeat was irregular, She felt the faint shock of an unbalanced vibration pass through the metal frame. The engine was beginning to oscillate. Not dramatically, but enough that someone with her hearing could detect it. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Aviation history flashed through her mind, how planes often failed not from sudden explosions, but from tiny ignored warnings. A loose bolt, a cracked blade, a fuel pump struggling. Mechanical failures rarely announced themselves loudly in the beginning. They whispered. Arya was hearing the whisper. Near her seat, the engine's rhythm faltered again. The metallic click became sharper, more urgent. 3 vibrations. Pause, 2 clicks. The pattern had changed. She looked toward the flight attendants. They moved casually, laughing, smiling, pushing their carts. They didn't feel it. They didn't hear it. But Arya did. Something inside the engine was deteriorating. Slowly but surely, her chest tightened. If this continued, the engine could stall, or worse, overheat. A high-altitude engine failure could spiral into something far more dangerous. The plane glided peacefully through the sky. But inside its left engine, the final warning had already begun. Arya exhaled shakily. She couldn't ignore this, but she also couldn't get up yet. Not without knowing for sure. She pressed her hand to the wall one last time. The vibration hit harder now, a deep, uneven stutter that should not happen during cruise. There was no doubt anymore. This was real. This was dangerous. And in a plane full of 270 passengers, only one girl had heard the engine's final warning begin. The cabin was calm, almost too calm, as if the world outside and the world inside were living 2 different realities. Passengers rested into the comfort of the clouds, unaware that something deep within, the aircraft had started whispering its final cry. Only Arya, sitting quietly near the left wing, could sense the invisible shift in the plane's heartbeat. Her breathing remained steady, but her thoughts raced like a storm. The engine's vibration had changed again, heavier, uneven, like a spinning wheel with a broken tooth. She could feel the imbalance through the floor, through the seat frame, through the thin metal skin of the aircraft. It wasn't her imagination. It wasn't coincidence. It was a signal. Arya closed her eyes, replaying every sound she had heard in the last few minutes. The pattern, the tremor, the deepening hum, the metallic crack. She mapped the rhythm in her mind, tracing it like a sequence only she could decode. Each vibration told a story. Each pause warned of something forming beneath the surface. Around her, passengers enjoyed their routine. Some scrolled through movies, some read books, some simply slept. A flight attendant walked past with a soft smile, completely unaware that the atmosphere around Arya felt like the slow tightening of a rope. The air pressure shifted slightly as the aircraft cruised farther into the open sky. Arya shifted in her seat, trying to better align her senses. Her fingers rested gently on the armrest. Her heels touched the metal bar under the seat. Her ear leaned subtly toward the side wall. And slowly, she absorbed every layer of sound leaking through the aircraft's body. The left engine groaned again, a stretched metallic drag. It felt as if something inside was struggling to maintain rotation. She imagined the engine's core spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. A single imbalance could grow exponentially under such stress. She remembered how engineers always said engines rarely fail instantly. They fail in stages, each stage speaking its own language. She was hearing the language of stage 2. A slight jolt rippled beneath her seat. Not enough for passengers to notice. Not enough for overhead lights to flicker. But enough for Arya's senses to sharpen instantly. A faint tremble rolled through the fuselage, spreading like a thin wave before fading into silence. She scanned the cabin again. Nothing unusual. Calm faces, relaxed movements, a soft glow of warm cabin lights. Her fingertips touched the wall once more. Another tremble. Slight, short, wrong. Arya's chest tightened. In her mind, she visualized the engine. Compressor blades spinning in sequences. Air pressure building in chambers. Fuel atomizing into perfect mist. If one blade cracked, even slightly, it could throw the entire rotor out of balance, causing vibrations like the ones she was hearing now. The crack would grow with each rotation, weakening the structure until it snapped. She swallowed hard. Suddenly, the engine let out a deeper, louder hum, brief, but enough to freeze the quiet inside her heart. The hum ended with a muted clank that echoed faintly through the cabin floor. Nobody reacted. but Arya felt the shock run straight into her bones. Her eyes drifted to the window. The wing sliced beautifully through the bright sky. No smoke, no flames, no visible signs of distress. But she didn't need visuals. Her senses had already painted the truth. The engine was preparing to fail. Her pulse quickened. She pressed her feet gently on the floor, grounding herself. She wanted to isolate the pattern more precisely, so she closed her eyes again and blocked out the soft chatter around her. She focused only on the engine's rhythm. It pulsed like a heartbeat on the brink of collapse. 3 long vibrations, 1 deep hum. Pause. A metallic clank. Then silence. Not normal, not safe. Her breathing turned shallow. She could feel the cabin's artificial calm, contrasting with the warning signals crawling through the engine. She wondered if the pilots had noticed anything. Most cockpit instruments were designed to detect changes in pressure, temperature, and fuel flow. But sometimes, the human ear detected things long before sensors did. Arya shifted slightly, her hand moving across the side wall to a lower section where the vibrations carried more clearly. The next pulse hit harder, a heavy, dragging tremor that traveled from the wing root into the cabin structure. Arya's heart jumped. The engine was nearing critical imbalance. She looked up, her eyes drifting toward the front of the plane. The cockpit door remained closed. Passengers walked calmly, unaware that death was slowly forming outside, wrapped in metal and spinning at unimaginable speed. A soft turbulence bump nudged the aircraft, but Arya knew that this bump wasn't the cause of her fear. It was just coincidence. But the engine used the moment to deliver its clearest warning yet, a sharp, grinding shake that rattled the tray table ever so slightly. Arya froze. The grinding wasn't part of the earlier pattern. It was new. And new sounds in engines were never good. A burst of heat crept up her spine. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed them on the surface again. Her hearing sharpened to painful sensitivity. The world around her blurred into the background. All she could hear was the broken rhythm of the engine. The grinding repeated, louder, longer, almost like 2 metal plates dragging against each other. Her breath caught in her throat. This was the kind of sound that preceded catastrophic failure. The kind of sound engineers hoped they would never hear. She imagined the worst-case scenarios: overheating, metal fatigue, a blade breaking loose, a surge causing the engine to stall violently, flames erupting mid-air. And all she could think was, if she stayed silent too long, the engine might cross a point of no return. Her instincts screamed that the aircraft didn't have much time left. Before the situation escalated, she steadied her breath and opened her eyes fully. Fear flickered inside them, but so did something stronger: resolve. Her seatbelt clicked softly as she shifted upright. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself. She had heard enough. She had analyzed enough. The signs were clear. The danger was real. 270 lives depended on what she would do next. The engine shuddered again, a violent, uneven jolt that made her press her fingers deeper into the armrest. This was no longer a whisper. This was the final warning. And it was getting louder. And now Arya had no choice. She had to act, before the engine's next breath became its last. Arya's mind raced, yet her hands stayed steady. The quiet girl who had gone unnoticed by everyone suddenly found herself at the heart of a crisis that no adult in the cabin had detected. The vibration beneath her seat had evolved from a warning, whisper into a violent signal she could no longer ignore. She knew instinctively that the engine would not survive much longer if left unattended. Her eyes scanned the cabin, fleetingly catching glimpses of calm, unsuspecting passengers. The contrast between their peace and the danger humming through the aircraft made her pulse thump faster. She had to find a way to communicate her discovery. The flight attendants were trained for emergencies, but only if the alert came through instruments, through sirens, through visible signs. This was something they could not sense. Only she could. Arya took a slow, deliberate breath. She pressed her hand to the side panel, feeling the vibrations travel with more clarity through the thin metal. She visualized the engine's mechanics again: spinning blades, pressurized chambers, fuel injectors, rotating shafts. Every sound mapped onto her mind like a living blueprint. A blade was faltering. A critical bearing was heating. The imbalance was growing exponentially. Another pulse reverberated through the aircraft, deeper, sharper. She flinched, feeling the subtle shudder in her spine. Her ears picked up the overlapping rhythms, the uneven oscillations, and the occasional metallic click. Each sound told her something engineers might have deduced from instruments, but she had interpreted it seconds, maybe minutes earlier. The cabin remained oblivious. Outside, clouds drifted lazily past the windows. The plane's shadow stretched across them like a silent sentinel. Inside, only Arya sensed the rhythm of an engine on the brink of collapse. Her fingers traced the tray table edge as if following the path of the vibrations, and she felt a new tremor, heavier, erratic, more urgent. The engine was entering a critical phase. If nothing was done, the imbalance could lead to catastrophic failure, overheating, blade detachment, or even a chain reaction affecting both engines. Arya's mind worked frantically, calculating, predicting, analyzing. She remembered watching pilots train on simulators, observing the cockpit instruments, seeing emergency procedures. She had memorized the layout of most commercial cockpits in case of curiosity. But now those mental lessons became vital. She had to act before the instruments even registered the warning. Her gaze flickered to the cockpit door. Locked, she realized she might be the first person aware that a full-blown emergency was imminent. Every second now mattered. The longer she waited, the closer the plane came to a disaster she could prevent. If only she could reach the controls. A violent shudder ripped through the cabin floor. It traveled from the wing root, under her seat, into her chest. The engine's metal had begun to strain audibly, a deep, dragging groan that harmonized with the faint clicks of failing components. Arya's stomach churned. She felt the raw power of a machine warning of its own mortality. She glanced at the row of passengers nearest her. A man rubbed his eyes, a child yawned, a woman checked her phone. None of them could sense what was happening. None of them would feel the tremor until it became too late. Arya's hands found the safety card tucked into her seat pocket. She unfolded it mechanically, but her eyes were elsewhere, analyzing, plotting, connecting dots that no adult could see yet. She understood that her only advantage was speed and precision. Hesitation would cost lives. Another pulse, this time louder, more violent, reverberating through the metal frame and into her bones. She pressed both hands against the panel, feeling the resonance in her fingertips. She closed her eyes and listened. Really, listened as if syncing her. Heartbeat with the engines, and then she noticed the subtle pattern that had emerged. A failing turbine blade producing intermittent metallic clicks, compounded by heat expansion making metal scrape metal. A cold realization hit her. The engine could fail in moments if corrective action was not taken. Arya rose from her seat cautiously, moving toward the nearest aisle. Every step made her hyper-aware of the vibrations traveling under the cabin floor. She observed the placement of flight attendants, the open tray tables, the passengers' posture, the layout, the position, the timing. She memorized it all in split seconds. She reached a point near the front of the plane. Here she could feel the vibrations from the left engine more acutely. The metal shivered under her fingertips as if whispering its final plea. She pressed her palm against the cabin wall and traced the path of the vibration, moving slowly, deliberately, mentally mapping the engine's faltering rhythm. A sudden jolt shook the plane. The left engine emitted a harsh, uneven hum that resonated through every inch of metal. The passengers swayed slightly, still unaware. But to Arya, it was an unmistakable signal. The critical phase had begun. Her mind raced through possibilities. Call the crew? Alert the captain? But the cockpit door was locked. Flight attendants weren't trained to interpret vibrations. There was only one way. She had to take direct action, to intervene in a system designed for adults, experts and trained professionals. Arya's pulse quickened. She approached the emergency intercom system. Its buttons gleamed faintly under the cabin light. She didn't need to press it. That would alert, but might not convey the urgency of what she had already detected. Instead, she observed, calculated, and plotted. The engine groaned again, a warning amplified by her heightened hearing. She realized she had just seconds to do something before the imbalance reached a point of no return. Her training, her instincts, her deep knowledge of engine sounds, all converged into one singular focus, prevent disaster now. With one hand braced on the wall and the other brushing along the emergency panel, Arya prepared to do what no one else could. She knew every passenger, every second, every movement mattered. The plane's heartbeat was failing, and she was the only one listening. The vibrations intensified, almost screaming through the cabin now. Her eyes widened as she recognized the unmistakable precursor of turbine blade failure. That metallic scraping that grew sharper, louder, more insistent. The final warning was no longer a whisper, it was a cry. And Arya, quiet, observant, and undeterred by fear, was ready to answer it. The left engine shuddered violently, a deep, grinding pulse that resonated through the cabin floor and up into Arya's chest. Every vibration carried an urgent warning, sharper, more insistent than before. She had been listening, mapping, and analyzing for what felt like hours, though it had only been minutes. She knew that time was slipping faster than anyone else realized. Passengers remained oblivious, lulled by the smooth hum of the other systems. Their calm contrasted painfully with the chaos. Resonating under the skin of the aircraft, Arya's heart pounded, not with fear, but with clarity. She had no choice but to act. She had to stop the impending disaster before it reached a point of no return. She pressed her hands firmly against the cabin wall, feeling the vibrations pulse through her fingertips. Every metallic groan, every irregular oscillation told her where the imbalance had grown worst. Her fingers traced the path of the engine's failing components, and her mind, trained by observation, documentaries, and intuition, worked faster than any instrument could. The plane jolted sharply as turbulence hit. The left wing dipped slightly, and the engine emitted a piercing, high-frequency squeal. It was a sound that could shatter metal if ignored. Arya felt it in her teeth, in her bones. The aircraft's body vibrated, with the resonance of a machine pleading for intervention. Her eyes darted toward the cockpit. The door remained locked. Flight attendants moved mechanically, unaware of the urgent signals. The cabin lights flickered slightly, but nothing indicated the true danger. To the passengers, everything remained normal, yet to Arya, the world had changed in an instant. She remembered the cockpit, layouts from her countless hours of research and simulations. She understood the sequence of switches, the engine cut-off procedures, the auxiliary controls. If she acted quickly, she could stabilize the failing engine, at least temporarily, buying precious time for the pilots to regain control. She moved deliberately toward the cockpit, pressing lightly against the wall for balance as the plane trembled beneath her. Her fingers brushed the emergency panel. She reached for the intercom system, but paused, realizing that calling the crew might delay her. Every second counted, and hesitation was lethal. Another shudder ripped through the cabin. The left engine's metallic groan had escalated into a deep, pulsating roar. She felt heat radiating. Faintly through the panel, the engine's core was reaching a dangerous threshold. Her instincts sharpened further. She had to listen to the rhythm, to feel the heartbeat of the machine, and to intervene directly. Arya took a deep breath. Her palms pressed against the emergency controls. She adjusted switches cautiously, guided by her perception of the engine's vibration. Each motion had to be precise. One wrong move could worsen the failure. She focused entirely on the pulse, the metallic clicks, the uneven hum. The plane shuddered violently again, tipping slightly to the left. The engine's sound transformed into a high-pitched wail, harmonizing with the creaking fuselage. Arya felt the resonance travel through her hands, through her feet, through every inch of her body. She could hear the micro-imperfections in the turbine, the subtle friction building between rotating components, and the dangerous rise in temperature. Her fingers moved with determination across the controls. She found the auxiliary stabilizers. She adjusted the throttle minutely, redirecting pressure to balance the failing turbine. The metallic groans responded subtly, diminishing slightly. A faint sigh of relief ran through her chest, a small but crucial victory. The cabin jolted again. She pressed harder, stabilizing the engine further. Every passenger, still unaware, continued their activities, reading, talking, napping. Yet above their heads, Arya had intervened in a life-or-death scenario. The plane's heartbeat, once unstable and threatening, was beginning to regain a steady rhythm under her guidance. She felt exhaustion creeping into her limbs, but she ignored it. The vibrations were fading, replaced by the smooth, powerful hum of a recovered turbine. The left engine, which had begun to fail seconds earlier, now spun evenly, its internal components aligned once more. Arya allowed herself a brief glance around. Her eyes met those of a young child several rows back. The child smiled innocently, unaware of the disaster that had nearly unfolded. A surge of relief washed over her. She had listened when no one else did. She had acted when no one else could. And she had saved lives. The cabin lights stabilized fully. The passengers remained calm, and the turbulence had passed. Yet Arya knew the crisis was not over. Pilots would need to be alerted. Instruments would require verification. But the immediate threat, the catastrophic failure that had begun with a subtle vibration, had been averted. The plane glided smoothly now, its engines humming in perfect synchrony. The left turbine's pulse was steady, regular, alive. Arya pressed her palm against the panel one final time, feeling the rhythm beneath her fingertips. She exhaled, the tension leaving her body in a long, quiet stream. She sat back in her seat, exhausted but triumphant. Around her, the cabin returned to normal. Passengers smiled, read, or slept, unaware that a quiet girl had just prevented a tragedy. The aircraft soared through the clouds, carrying its passengers safely toward their destination, all because one person had listened when everyone else remained deaf to the warning. And as the sun began to set outside, casting golden rays across the plane's wings, Arya closed her eyes. She had heard the final warning, and she had answered it. In that moment, 270 lives were saved, and the world had no idea that a quiet, observant teenage girl had been the unseen hero of Flight 907. The engine's rhythm was steady now, but Arya knew one thing clearly. Sometimes, survival depends not on instruments, not on procedures, but on the courage to listen, the clarity to understand, and the will to act when everyone else hesitates. For the girl who heard the engine's final warning, hope had spoken loud enough to save hundreds, and that hope would remain, invisible to the world, except in the heartbeat of the plane she had saved.